For this project, I started with a 21 by 17 inch frame that I had picked up from Goodwill for $3.99. I removed the backing, I removed the glass, I cleaned up the frame, I cleaned up the glass, and then I replaced the glass into the frame. And then I used silicone caulk to go around the perimeter. Now I ended up throwing out the caulk that I had in here because I had cut the tip down too far, so it was making the bead of caulk real thick. So here I cut it right at the very tip, and then what it'll do is just put out a real thin bead of caulk. If you've seen any of my other videos, I was complaining about the caulk being too wide and messy, and so that's what I was doing wrong. So anyway, I go around the perimeter of the back of the frame, and this serves two purposes. It holds the glass in place once it dries, and it also keeps any resin from leaking through once it's flipped over to the other side and you apply the resin. After I finish putting all the caulking around and it's dried for 24 hours, I use painter tape as an extra precaution, and I put that around the perimeter. And even though you have the caulking and the painter's tape, you should still always put this on a protective surface with paper under it when you are pouring any kind of resin on top of it. So I purchased this stained glass from Hobby Lobby. You can get it anywhere from $8 to $12 a piece. It's a good deal. And I traced out 4 orchid leaves. And I learned how to cut stained glass actually on YouTube. And I'm not an expert stained glass cutter, so if you guys want to learn how to do it, you should probably watch it, either take a class or watch it on YouTube. And here I go breaking this leaf in half by accident. So what I do is just make it smaller and use my nipper tools to reshape it before I put it in the tumbler. And so I end up with 4 orchid leaves that I've cut in half, and I put permanent marker on them, but once you put those into the tumbler, it will take all those markings off and it'll smooth out all the jagged surfaces that you see here. So I'm putting it in with a bunch of other petals and that I have cut up earlier. Now once it's in the tumbler, you cover it with water and you add grit. I use 36 grit, which is much coarser than what a lot of people use. I think it helps tumble it a lot faster. This is my MJR 40-pound tumbler that I've had for a while. It's very, very messy. I clean it up probably about once a month. You have to use this lithium blaster oil that just makes a mess, and you have to spray it every single day that it's running. So after 4 days, I dump it out and rinse it off. Now, previous times I've done just the long pieces and none of them have broke, and this time I think I kind of overloaded it, and not any of the small leaves that I made, they turned out fine, but quite a few of the longer stems that I made broke, but they still turned out okay. So my suggestion would be just not to overload it so much. Just put the straight ones in if that's what you're doing. So then I bring it back into the house and I wash it with soap and water, and then I lay it out on a towel to dry. So now that I have all the leaves and stems for my orchid flowers, next I need the flowers itself. And here I'm going through what I call my little glass crumbs, picking out the little pieces of pink that I'm going to need for the flowers. And here I need several larger pieces in kind of a round shape. And I really can't find exactly what I want. So what I'm doing is using the nipper tool and cutting up the already tumbled glass that I have into the shape that I want. And I'm looking for about 12 pieces altogether. So once I get my 12 pieces, of course you can see that the edges are all rough, I take them and I throw them into my tumbler. And this time I use a small tumbler because there's no sense in using the great big one. I use the small tumbler, throw them in, and I tumble those for about 4 days also. After 4 days, I rinse them out outside by the hose, and then I take them inside and I wash them with soap and water. Now you'll notice there's two different color pinks. I'm using the lighter pink for the main part of the flower, and then I'm using the darker pink for another part of the flower, the center of it. And the center of it, the darker pink, is actually glass that I picked up at a garage sale that was a candlestick, a very, very old candlestick, and it had a crack in it. And the woman who was having the garage sale said it used to belong to her grandmother. She has the other one, but because this was cracked, she was getting rid of it, and she was selling it for a quarter. And I was telling her, well, I'm just going to break it up anyway. Normally, I don't tell people I'm going to break up their grandma's dishes, but I didn't feel funny about it because it was broken already. But anyway, when I told her what I was going to do with it, she was very interested, and she said she's always wanted to tumble glass. So, but didn't know anything about it or how to do it or where even to begin. And this is kind of how I ended up actually starting this YouTube channel, because so many people have asked me questions about it, and there's just so much information. It's just so hard to explain in one sitting. So now that I have all my flower pieces, I go out to the garage and I find an old bowl that has a little bit of a chip in it and decide I'm going to use that for my vase. And I kind of use the nipper tool to shape it a little bit, and then I have a little sander that's hooked in here, and I sand the edges so that to get all the real big bumps out of it. Now that I have all the pieces ready, I start assembling the plant with the leaves and the stems and the flowers, and you'll notice I'm just using the lighter pink flowers pieces. Each orchid is made up of 5 pieces, and later I'll put the darker pink on as the center after I pour the resin. And then I purchased this glass that is called Vitrigraph glass. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. It's long, stringy pieces of glass that I guess they stretch the glass and it becomes like strings. And you'll see, I've seen it in a lot of different projects, say on Etsy, where they use it for a stem and other things like that. Well, you can just break it up. And in this instance, I'm using it to make, I don't know if you've ever seen an orchid flower before, but they have their roots that kind of come out. Now, some orchids grow in soil and some orchids are just simply air plants. And whether, it doesn't really matter which one it is, they both have the roots that kind of stick out like that. So I'm using the Vitrigraph glass to simulate that in this project. Now I'm ready to use the resin. When I use resin, I wear a respirator, I wear gloves, I open the window. It's best to do it in a well-ventilated area and to wear a respirator. This art resin that I'm using is a 1-to-1 ratio resin, 1 part resin to 1 part hardener, and when you mix them, notice when you first put it in the container it's clear, and then once you start mixing it becomes cloudy. You're supposed to mix it as slowly as you can. The slower you mix it, the less bubbles you'll get. And it looks like I'm mixing it real fast in this instance, but I have the video sped way up. You're supposed to scrape the sides and the bottom as you mix, and then you'll notice it goes from clear to cloudy and then back to clear after about 3 minutes of mixing. Typically when I put the resin on, I pour it over the glass, and I do use the spoon to pour it over portions of the glass, but I'm trying not to pour it over the pink flowers because the pink is very translucent. Sea glass is translucent. Tumbled glass and sea glass are both translucent, and when you put resin over them, it makes it even more translucent. So in this pink color being such a light color, I'm afraid we might lose it. So I'm trying to kind of go around it. And normally I don't do this with the blues and the darker colors. I think the resin on top of it makes it look prettier, but in this case I'm trying to go around. I don't know if you saw any of my old videos, but I did a video on a Christmas tree, a beachy blue Christmas tree, and I used the sea glass, and it was such a pretty light blue, but when you put the resin over it, it almost disappeared. It was so light because the resin does make it more translucent. So when working with resin, you really have to push it up into the corners and along the sides. And I know all the resins say that they're self-leveling, but they're really are only self-leveling to a certain degree. And you really have to look carefully and make sure you have it all along the sides and in the corners. Next, I'm using the butane torch to get the bubbles out. This has made everything so much easier, this little portable butane torch. It's so much easier than the big heat gun that I used to use because you had to plug it in and then worry about the cord reaching and was it going to drag over the resin or was it going to get in the way, and then it put out so much air that it blew the resin and it blew the glass. So anyway, personally, I just like the little butane torch. To me, it's so much easier. One of the things when you're working with resin you should have on hand is rubbing alcohol, and that's what I'm using now to clean up any of the spills because I have dripped some resin onto the frame of the project that I'm doing. Rubbing alcohol will get it off of the frame as long as it's not dried. Get it off of your hands, get it out of your clothing, get it out of your hair. And next, I had told you I was putting the darker pink ones on last. I'm kind of dipping them into the, I should have gloves on. I'm dipping them into the, here I'm trying to pick them up with the little tool there. It doesn't work. Dipping it into the resin and then putting in the center of each of the flowers. The pink that I told you was originally a candlestick that I had picked up at a garage sale. Now that it's done, I'm kind of looking at it from all angles and putting a little bit more resin on top. I can see some spots that I missed. Sometimes you have to, look at it from different angles. And then when it's done, it has to sit on a flat, level surface and dry overnight up to 24 hours. Hey everyone, hope you can see this okay. I'm not sure if this is going to be the permanent home, but one of the bathrooms has a green paint in the back, and I thought that might look pretty in the background. But I actually have another painting that usually hangs there. But I think it turned out real cute. I'm happy with it. I've never done anything. I've seen different things on Pinterest where they put it in like a container, and it looks like that. But so it's going to be at eye level, so you actually won't see down into it. But I didn't know if maybe I should have put something in there, some more glass coming out of it. But all in all, I think it turned out cute. And I hope you guys enjoyed the project. I'd love to see if you guys try anything like this. My email address should be under my about information. So if you want to send me any pictures, I would love to see. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Have a great day.